Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson again. How you, Logan?
I'm doing good.
All right. And Cameron Abbott. How are you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What is going on? So today, going to be a bit of a unique situation for us. This is our as we continue our Pirates of the Caribbean sojourn through the movies. We're doing Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest, which we've already done an episode of that D Plus show on. Episode 36, back in September of 2020. Logan and I sat down and talked about that one. Why we didn't just do the first one at that time?
I don't remember. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, you were just like, let's do that one. Let's do Dead Man's Chest. Why not? And I was like, all right. I think maybe you were watching it probably with Shravia or something as part of just something you were doing.
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, we so this joins basically Hamilton as the only other thing we've done multiple That D Plus shows dedicated to. Because of that, some of the trivia will be like a little bit trimmed down because I've already done trivia on that, as well as like and the cast stuff we already did in a lot of the cast in just in last week's episode. But yes, a little bit of the history lesson here. Excuse me. Originally released July 7th, 2006. This was the highest domestic gross of 2006 with $423 million and the highest worldwide gross of 2006 with $1.06 billion. So just keep that in mind, regardless of how much we dump on the movie over the next hour or so. We know nothing, and people came out and saw this movie in droves compared to everything else that year. Any guesses as to like what movies it beat out?
2006. Yep. I was a freshman in high school.
Not looking at the list of films that came out this year or that year.
I mean, feel free, like, because So I as typical, I have like other releases of this time included, and some of them are on there, and some are not.
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, there's no Batman. There's no superhero film really.
But this is prior to the dominance of superhero films. Like The Dark Knight won't come out for another
2 more years.
2 more years, yeah. So you have, the one right off the bat that like Cars, I'm not surprised by in hindsight, but at the time I think I'm really surprised by is Cars. The new it's the newest Pixar film. This is the aughts. This is the era of Pixar. And Cars I think is the start of like them not being as well regarded. Mainly because like I'm not a fan of this movie. I think Cars is way too long and is not that interesting.
Cars was the number 3 highest domestic gross that year and number 6 overall gross. Any guesses as to what might have been number 2? It's an out there thing. I don't think I would ever guess, but I will see if you guys have it.
Ooh.
2006. I was 16.
And there's definitely one on this list that you should pull, Logan.
Is it Mission Impossible? Oh, Casino Royale.
Casino Royale,
yeah.
Casino Royale was number 9 domestic and number 4 overall.
Yeah.
With
did Mission Impossible 3 come out this year too?
Mission Impossible 3 was this year. It was number 8 overall. It did not chart in the top 10 domestically, but it was number 8 highest grossing film of the worldwide gross.
Casino Royale and Mission Impossible. Was Superman Returns, was it 2? That feels like way too high for Superman Returns.
Yeah, no, that's way too high. Superman Returns was number 6 though. It was, and then number 9 in the worldwide gross, number 6 domestic. So I'm going to just call it number 2 domestic gross. The second highest grossing movie of 2006, Night at the Museum.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Night at the Museum.
Hell yeah,
really good film.
It was. It was the number 5th overall. The number 2nd overall behind Pirates of the Caribbean, The Da Vinci Code.
Oh yeah.
I will say, Night at the Museum definitely takes the like holiday film category. Like it was the I think it was
so good. That movie's so much fun.
That came out that holiday season because like my family went and saw it. And like the summer film, like the summer blockbuster that everybody went to see was Pirates Dead Man's Chest. So.
Yeah. I'll also throw out there. So Dead Man's Chest was $423 million domestic gross. At number 2, Night at the Museum was $250 million.
Yeah.
Like in a completely different league. Pirates was this year. Which goes to what we talked about last week of like Pirates was everywhere for that like time. And we definitely now in hindsight we feel burnt out on it, but back then people were
we only had one thing at this point in time. There's nothing to be burnt out on, right? Like, and that's what I was gonna say. Like we might get to this later on, but this feels as good a time as any to bring it up. Like 2006, like you were saying, is like just such a like peak Pirates mania kind of thing, right? Like it was. Like I was a freshman in high school. Like I remember this year very vividly, and it was just like omnipresent everywhere. Like you couldn't escape Pirates in like a really fun, exciting way, right? Like you'd only had that one thing. In like some ways, it was almost, I think, a little bit like going into Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, right? Like we'd only had the first Matrix, and like everyone loved it. It was such a crazy thing. They filmed both of those like back to back in the same way. And then you saw it and you either liked it or didn't. It was much more divisive, but like going into it, the hype was so real. Like, especially being like high school, college age, like we all would have been like, I feel like all of my friends at least were like so hype on this movie.
Yeah, everybody who didn't see the first one in theaters, but then like grew to love it and like watch it over and over and over again after 2003. All showed up to see it in theaters 2006. Also, to your point there, Cam, about like we haven't hit the boom of the superhero movie. X-Men: The Last Stand was number 4 on the domestic.
Hell yeah! Chart what a moment in time.
And I think also like number 8 overall. No, number. It also should be
put in context too for like modern listeners. Like this movie hitting $1 billion was like, that was back when that was still not happening in any sort of normal way, right? Like it's still a huge deal now, don't get me wrong, but it was like a humongous thing at the time to hit $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah, I have that. It's in trivia we covered last time, so I wasn't probably going to, I was maybe going to give it a little bit of lip service, but I'll pull it up here in the context of that. At $135.6 million domestically in its opening weekend, it was the first motion picture ever to reach $100 million, the fastest, accomplishing that feat in 2 days. And it held the box office record for highest opening weekend, beating Spider-Man 2 from 2004. And then it would be broken the next year by Spider-Man 3. It was very much like a... Yeah, the $1 billion, it was a early rare entry into the $1 billion club, and it was one of those, like, it was just plowing through fastest.
Opening day, right, yeah.
Which is, like, it's wild to think that in the context of, like, fast forward to Avengers Infinity War, which makes $1 billion worldwide in its opening weekend, and, like, blows all sorts of records out of the water. But back to some of our other stuff. Other releases of the time, as we alluded to, Cars came out June 9th, 2006, followed by The Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, June 16th. The worst, yes. They were on a good cycle there where Fast and Furious and Pirates were both gunning for that summer box office. Yes, that was June 16th. Superman Returns, which we mentioned earlier, June 28th. The Devil Wears Prada, June 30th. This came out again June 7th. And then followed up Clerks 2, July 21st. Little Miss Sunshine on July 26th. And just because it will come into play with one of our performers later, Miami Vice, the reboot of Miami Vice, was July 28th. Yeah. Movie has a runtime of 2 hours and 31 minutes. And in the Disney live action timeline of things, this came between The Shaggy Dog, which had come out in March of that year, and Invincible, which would come out August 25th. We've already covered. This is the second in the Pirates movies, of course. A 3-year gap between Curse of the Black Pearl and this one. Our roll call. Director, once again, Gore Verbinski, who we talked about last week, had worked on eclectic things like Bad Religion music videos and the Budweiser Frogs commercials. And then he would go on after this to do Rango and The Lone Ranger. The writers on this one, only Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. Stuart Beattie and Jay Wolpert, who had worked on and written for the previous film, are only in here as like characters credits for this one. Elliott and Rossio kind of spearheaded the script on this one, which, as we may get into in some of the trivia, was very much being written on by the seat of their pants on set. Of course, starring once again Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, Orlando Bloom as Will Turner, Keira Knightley as Elizabeth Swann, Jack Davenport as Norrington, newcomer Bill Nighy as Davy Jones. He's done a ton of different UK projects, and then including stuff like Love Actually, Shaun of the Dead, the beautiful episode on Van Gogh of Doctor Who, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows as Scrimgeour, I believe. The Pokemon Detective Pikachu. He was in Emma. He was in the Castlevania Netflix series. And he was most recently nominated for Best Actor, losing to Brendan Fraser for his role in Living. Jonathan Pryce returning as Governor Swan. Stellan Skarsgård, another newcomer, although a established character from the first one, coming in as Bootstrap Bill.
Spit an image.
Will's father.
Orlando Bloom.
Yes, indeed. Stellan Skarsgård coming from projects like Good Will Hunting. And then, of course, after this, he would go on to be in things like Mamma Mia, the Thor franchise of the MCU, Chernobyl, Dune, and most recently, Andor. As the wonderful Luthen Rail. Tom Hollander in here, new as Cutler Beckett, new big bad antagonist, kind of taking over the role that Jack Davenport had played. He was in Pride and Prejudice alongside Keira Knightley. He's also been in the film About Time, in the Bohemian Rhapsody film a few years back. He was in The Kingsman, which is the Kingsman like prequel about the founding of the Kingsman. He plays Alfred in the Harley Quinn animated series, and he was most recently in he was the voice of the Mole in the Oscar-winning short this year, animated short, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. So he's another from the recent batch of Academy Awards figures. Naomi Harris in here as Tia Dalma, a very young Naomi Harris, yes. Realizing like the things I've seen her in since. Prior to this, she'd been in 28 Days Later, but right after this, she had a very busy July because she was also in Miami Vice. And then she would go on to play Moneypenny in the James Bond series, starting with Skyfall, then on into Spectre and No Time to Die. She was also in the film Moonlight. And then she was in Rampage, the Dwayne Johnson film based on the Rampage video game a few years back. Less
exciting, but yeah.
She was also in Venom: Let There Be Carnage, to the people who decided to sit through that one. And then lastly, Jeffrey Rush returning as an uncredited Barbossa cameo, obviously in the setup for the third film here. Some trivia, covering briefly covering some trivia that we covered last time we did this film. Of course, as we already alluded to, this was shot back to back with At World's End, much like the Matrix films. In the DVD commentary, the scene about Kraken versus Kraken was added to correct Kevin McNally, aka Gibbs's like performance of it in a earlier scene where he says Kraken, and people were like, oh, I think it's Kraken. Well, he's already said Kraken in earlier shots, and everybody else started saying Kraken as a result of it. So it just kind of they were like, well, people are going to give us crap if we just leave it in there. So they threw in that little scene between Rigetti and Pintel arguing and debating about it. And then for a dose of authenticity, the final twist of the film, the actors were not told prior to filming that Jeffrey Rush was going to be appearing in the movie. They were told that it would be Anna Maria, Zoe Saldana's character from Curse of the Black Pearl. So the look of surprise on their faces as Rush descends are genuine. Yeah, and there was also one on this in the same vein of like, the kiss between Keira Knightley and Johnny Depp was not in Orlando Bloom's script, so his like experience would be like genuine or whatever. I'm like, okay, but that also doesn't really speak to how films are shot. Like, okay, so their reaction, maybe if you've got like the camera on all of them for that first take, is genuine surprise, but also like that implies that you've got a camera shot at all of them. And then Jeffrey Rush walking like on behind the camera to like have them all startled, and then you still have to go and do the shot of Jeffrey Rush coming down the stairs. So it's always like weird when I see these kinds of like trivia things. I'm like, okay, but is that really how it worked, or is that just a fun story that you guys tell to add to the allure of the film? Anyway,
I mean, I can't remember what the movie was, but they had some sort of antidote like this, like, you know, they didn't know what was about to happen, and then it happened. And then the director, like, I filmed multiple takes after that too, but the first one was the best one, right? It was the most genuine reaction, right? It's like, I assume just like here, they probably did other shots, other takes after this, just in case something was wrong in the background or something. But this is probably the one that was the best, and they kept it in. Like,
yeah,
that's what I think probably happened.
I'm just saying, like, if it's very rare on a film set that like a camera setup would be like, maybe like our podcast here, where like there's a camera at Cameron and a camera at me, and then if somebody like walks in the door, you're gonna get both of our reaction shots. But also like we don't have a camera at the door right now, so like you'd still have to go back and shoot that.
I'm sure they did
too.
like pickup shots of like just because for the shot of just Jeffrey Rush coming down, you don't really, that can be done later on because you don't need anyone's reaction for that.
Shot, so if they had a camera set up for that, and then they had Jeffrey Rush come down off camera. And that's everybody's genuine reaction to him doing that, and then they do the scene of him coming down the ladder. That makes sense.
Yeah.
The ship one doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah. The ship one of like
I've been on mute that entire bit.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Whoops.
To reiterate my point, I totally see the Barbosa one where they film everybody's reaction first, then have Jeffrey Rush come back down the stairs again to do that. That's fine. But the Will Turner one, like Will's reaction to it when it's like a close-up shot of him and just him. Like coming back around and looking at that, and then they're like, oh, and then we're gonna have him react to what's going on. The cameras would be in, like the camera crew and sound people would be in front of Orlando Bloom. In that scene.
There's no way they have like the point of view shot of him looking onto the boat and seeing Elizabeth and Johnny Depp kiss, and a camera getting his reaction. There's no way those two things are happening at the same time. So it's just a weird kind of thing.
It
doesn't make sense.
More than that, the Captain Barbosa one, like, it's like, yeah, I believe that makes sense. Sure, like big reveal kind of thing. But like the Orlando Bloom one is like sort of a big plot point for like their interaction the rest of that movie. And it'd be like if that one's also true, like I would wonder what they had told Orlando was going to happen, because he acts so weird the rest, like, because films are not shot in chronological order, right? So the assumption then is that like they filmed the rest of the movie afterwards, but that's not necessarily likely because films are not shot in chronological order unless you're doing Boyhood, right? And so it's like, it's unlikely that that's the reality of the situation too, because what about all these other scenes after that happened?
Yeah. Anyway, some new trivia for this run around. The etymology of Dead Man's Chest. A popular pirate punishment was marooning. The pirate who was being punished was put on an island and left, sometimes for a few days, sometimes permanently. The Dead Man's Chest, quote, is a small rocky island, so called because the rocks reminded pirates of a rib cage. It has no water or shade, and it is and is so low that waves frequently wash over it. To be marooned on the chest was to be given a death sentence under the broiling Caribbean sun. When Will is looking for Captain Jack Sparrow, the last guy he asks tells him about an island where the long pork is very good. As Cameron pointed out as we were watching it, long pork is a euphemism for human meat, setting up the reveal of the cannibal tribe on the island. For the film's release, the Walt Disney Company redesigned Pirates of the Caribbean rides in Disney World and Disneyland, featured Jack Sparrow, Barbosa, and a projected image of Davy Jones as part of the attraction, which premiered on the same day as the film. We alluded to that a little bit last week, but yes. And speaking of the ride, Tia Dalma's Swamp is largely a recreation of the opening bayou scene of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, complete with fireflies.
It looks great too.
Yeah. The hierarchy among the Flying Dutchman crew is reflected by just how mutated they were. Newcomers have low-level infections, which resemble rosacea, while veterans have full-blown undersea creature attributes, like looking like a hammerhead shark. This marked the famed visual effects house Industrial Light and Magic's, ILM's, first Oscar win since Forrest Gump. And also, this is the only Pirates of the Caribbean film to win the award in any of its nominated categories. So yes, this is Oscar-winning Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, in addition to it being the highest-grossing film, the billion-dollar earner. Whatever else we think about it did do. What did
ILM win the? What do you know? What category it was?
It was visual effects, best visual effects.
I mean, the movie looks great.
Yeah, it's
credit, right?
It's basically like the visual effects for Davy Jones and the crew and the Kraken.
For the time that this movie came out in 2006, insane, absolutely insane level of what they were able to do with it. I don't think on a technical level anything about this film is bad. I think everything on a technical level is great. And I'll get further into that a little bit later.
I also wanted to say the same thing. I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, so I'll give it a shout here. But I think Davy Jones, how that character looks is incredible now in 2023. I think that could slide into any movie nowadays, and I think he looks just as good. I think that alone is an incredible thing, and that looks a lot better than a lot of CG stuff done in modern films. I think the level of detail and his tentacles and tendrils and everything about him is so good. And so I didn't want to do this episode without mentioning that, but I think he's so fantastically realized in this film.
Yeah. The two films that it beat out that year were Superman Returns, which we've already mentioned before, and Poseidon, which was a retelling reboot of the Poseidon adventure.
Yeah, with Kurt Russell, I think, in it. Yeah.
We'll say yes. I don't know.
Cameron shook his head, so I'm going with yes.
Wait, Kurt?
Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell, Josh Lucas, and
knew it.
That's where Wikipedia cuts it off.
I know it might be action movies.
Yeah. Planning began in June 2004, and production was much larger than Curse of the Black Pearl. By November, the script was still unfinished, as the writers didn't want Gore Verbinski and Jerry Bruckheimer to compromise what they had written. So Verbinski worked with James Ward Burkett to storyboard major sequences without need of a script, while Elliott and Rossio wrote a prep script for the crew to use before they finished the script they were happy with. By January 2005, with rising costs and still no script, Disney threatened to cancel the film, but ultimately changed their minds. Writers would accompany the crew on location, feeling that the lateness of their rewrites would improve the spontaneity of the cast performances. And, maybe that has some kind of effect on the film. So maybe they were shooting it chronologically because they didn't know how it was ending.
That feels. I just rewatched Quantum of Solace a week or two ago. A very Quantum of Solace energy to that. I'm just we're just gonna kind of not have a script, and then we're just gonna get there and we'll make it up on the spot. We'll see how that goes, and not great. That's how it typically goes.
And then a little tease. When Jack Sparrow is at Teodama's hut, there is a necklace on the table, which while Jack is stealing the ring, the picture of the necklace is the same image on the music box of Davy Jones' pipe organ, a hint to a major plot point that will be revealed in At World's End. So yeah, it's there if you know what to look for, it was there the whole time kind of thing. Yes. So that's what I got for the trivia. So I will throw it, since Logan and I have already talked extensively about this movie, I will first throw it this time to Cameron to share his thoughts. Take it away, Cam. You took notes. You said you took notes on this one while we were watching it. So
I did take notes. I have notes on my phone. Because by the time I think we got through the first third of the movie, it's I have to do notes because I'm not going to remember this. And a third of the way through, I literally put the first three things. Too many set pieces, too many plot hooks, and too many people, question mark. I deeply appreciate, however, how evil the East India Trading Company is, as it's almost as evil as they are in real life. Almost as evil.
Give it a movie. They're gonna just start murdering people the next one right to open it.
I don't know. Let's the East, for people who don't understand the context, the East India Trading Company literally hooked China on opium. Then when China said we're going to like ban opium, made England go to war against China. And like that's a whole like geopolitical thing that has enormous fallout that is still effective to this point today.
Oh, you missed the low-hanging fruit for the East India Trading Company. They basically colonized India, right?
Oh, they did colonize
That's
all
the
of India.
easy one to go for, right at the gate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if traditionally, like, I think I think the moral questionability of it, it's like, were they really that evil? It's like East India Trading Company is potentially the most evil group of human beings to exist, pre-Nazi. I think.
For more on this, watch last year's RRR.
Yeah, like the East India Trading Company is really bad. So when it's like, were they this evil? It's like they were way worse. Like one dude in the East India Trading Company screwing over Jack Sparrow is minuscule to what they actually did in real life. There's a really cool sword fight at the end, but let me actually go ahead and before I get into that.
Is it a really cool sword fight at the end?
It is, but here's the problem, is that by the time you get to the sword fight, you're exhausted. This movie, despite being only 8 minutes longer than the last one, only 8 minutes longer, feels so much longer. Also, I noted, you're like, part of the problem of it and why it's like the question mark of too many, like, is there too many set pieces? It's like, yes, because you never stay in one place long enough for a scene to actually develop. There's so many quick cuts of somebody going here, there, everywhere. Even Tortuga, where when Will's there, is cut up into like 5 or 6 different pieces. It's so and it's like almost like it was written on the spot. Like they literally shot scenes to answer questions about bigger plot scenes or bigger places they wanted to hit up. The Cannibal Island's way too long. Just way too long.
Yeah.
Like nothing they do is done to establish these characters, and I think the biggest thing to really point out is, so by the time you get to what is actually like on a technical level and the way that they do it is a very interesting and very cool sword fight scene between 3 people who have completely different goals in what they're trying to accomplish. I like that idea. I like the way that it was executed, but it was but it was the reality of it just being so exhaustive by that point. I was no longer in the mood for chicanery. I was no longer in the mood for trickaroos. I was no longer in the mood for any of this stuff. I just wanted the movie to be over by that point. I wanted a conclusion to the film. And the fact that it was just like they did the Pirates thing of like, oh, there's going to be twists and turns throughout the entire fight. But by that time, you're already exhausted. So you have all of that happening. And so all the creativity around it is wasted. All the creativity of like these the windmill or the mill scene, which is in its own way a callback to the blacksmith shop in the first one, with the mechanisms and kind of the things they're doing throughout it. There's a lot of really interesting things, but probably the biggest issue is the movie tries way too much to catch up on the tight finish the first one gave us. So the first movie, and like another thing I wrote here is there's not a single element that's atrocious or terrible, but it's too much. It's over bloated and sorry.
I would argue Jack Sparrow falling from a cliff through like a dozen bridges and then landing on the ground and being perfectly fine. That's pretty atrocious and egregious. Yeah. Like he's just a Looney Tunes character.
By the time
in this
I
film,
wrote
especially
that,
by that mill fight, when he like just pops into the mill and just kind of starts like riding. It's like they just literally make him a cartoon character here.
I think part of it is also I had forgotten about the bridge parts. By the time I wrote that note, some of these notes are written at the end, like towards the end of the film. Clearly, because like I jump from like very general complaints to very specific ones at the end of the film. I think overall the film's just so overbloated because the thing about the first film is, I said it last week, it is so like quintessentially perfect. It has a perfect beginning, middle, and end. It's a succinct story, and it doesn't need anything else. And so how did they create a sequel? By basically saying, we're not going to follow through with the resolutions that we got at the end of the first film. And we're going to have to create entire motivations and characters and plot developments and hooks and stuff that completely disrupt any sort of idea of good filmmaking or storytelling. It's so plot heavy with so many different hooks and so many different characters that because everybody needs to have a reason to do something. What are our first three main leads? It's Will, Jack, and Elizabeth. Okay, so at one point they have three completely different storylines that are ongoing at the same time. At no point, and they try to deal with that by crisscrossing Will and Elizabeth between with Jack at different parts of the film, but it doesn't lift that up at all, because instead we get additional scenes of the governor and dealing with that. You have there's so many things that they add to just bloat up this film to try to explain away plot holes. And they're trying to do it, and what it's done is that it's very clear they did not have a succinct story that they wanted to tell with 2 and 3. They had no idea where they wanted to end things. They had no idea where they were going to go with certain things. And it is super evident in just how over bloated the first half of this movie is, that it feels, by the time you get Will leaving the ship, the Flying Dutchman, there's climactic moments in that of he gets the key, all that stuff happens. That's what, 2/3 of the way through the film. There's an entire other third of the film probably at that point. Trying to think. Because then he just hitches a ride on the Flying Dutchman afterwards, which makes no sense, because when the Flying Dutchman goes underwater, what happens to Will?
Don't worry about it.
There's so many things that are just glaring plot holes that still exist in the film. But it just doesn't do itself any sort of justice with how it's going about it. And so even though you have some really cool things and cool ideas, and they're well executed by the technical aspect of it, it falls flat, because it's just, by the time you get to those cool endpoints, it's bloated and you're tired and you're exhausted. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I was gonna. We talked a little bit about, and you kind of touched on there a little bit of the fact that your main three characters are split up for a lot of this movie. It is very much the same kind of complaints that we saw many, many years later with Last Jedi. You take, Finn and Poe and Rey and the chemistry that we all enjoyed about them in Force Awakens, and you send them all on their own separate journeys in the Fallout movie, which makes that a less fun movie. And one of the few bright spots we have of Rise of Skywalker ends up being them all coming back together for most of that movie. And so that was it very much struck me on this one of oh yeah, they did that exact same thing. They as we touched on a lot last week, they decided, actually, we're going to make Jack the main character of this whole saga now.
Right.
And so he's going to be the lead, even though he really only works well as a supporting character. And so everybody else is going to suffer and become, how are we supporting Jack's quest on this one? Yeah. And I think, all of their individual story arcs suffer as a result of that. And then there's just a whole bunch of contrived conflict and stuff. The Elizabeth and Will, will they, won't they kind of stuff that gets thrust in there with Elizabeth maybe having a flirtatious thing with Jack, but not really. But I mean, they clearly wrote and said, let's take a couple of our attractive people and give them, make eyes to each other and stuff. And it's just this is weird. This is odd. This is uncomfortable. So there was that, fumbling aspect of things. And then as I talked with Cameron about when it was done, it's this doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end, because this is the 2.5 hour beginning to a 5.5 hour movie. Since obviously so much of this is going to be wrapped up in At World's End, that they weren't even interested in giving this story an ending. Apart from it's wild, because I bet Rossio and Elliot were thinking there, we've made our empire. We've made our movie that ends on a down note, with Jack being eaten by the Kraken, but we're gonna, get everybody to come back in and Return of the Jedi in At World's End. And it's nope, that's not at all what you did here, guys. Boo. But like, I can very much see them trying to hit those same kind of, like, it wouldn't surprise me if you go back and like look at interviews from the time and then be like, oh yeah, this is our Empire Strikes Back kind of, like, you know, of our trilogy saga thing. Because they're clearly trying to hit those like beats, but very, very poorly, I think. Logan,
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything everyone said, right? I mean, to me, I think it's as simple as they're doing too much, right? I think this is a great example of people don't dislike long movies. People like poorly told movies. The issue is not that the movie is too long. The issue is that the movie is just poorly told and has too much stuff happening and isn't paced well, right? This movie could be, 3 hours long and be fine, or basically the exact same amount of time like the first film. And we didn't have a single critique about that length and period of time. It's just the fact the movie's not paced out well. It's not structured well. There's way too much happening in this movie. That's its biggest issue, right? Is that there's so many spinning plates. And to Trevor's point, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth that I was going to say, is that this movie tries to be Empire, but it suffers a lot, I think, from what a lot of these like part 1 and 2 movies do, is that part 1 typically doesn't have an ending, and it just sort of like leaves you like partway through the story, and they just have to like cobble something together to have it end, right? Which is part of why I think Matrix Reloaded is one of the better ones, because it gives you at least some sort of finality while also giving you teases of what comes next, right? But I mean, so many of the other films, whether it's like the Twilight ones or the Hunger Games did it or Harry Potter did it, right? Those are based off books that were one story, and so it's hard to find a random stopping point in that story because it wasn't meant to be designed that way, right? And I think this is a story they made, and it still doesn't give you an ending in any sort of effective way. I really do not like the sword fight at the end of the film. I disagree with Cameron, maybe more than anything else on that point. I think that sword fight's really bad. I think it's, to me, like the prime example of like, let's go bigger is better. And it's like, it's not. Like the sword fights in the first one, either the one at the blacksmith shop or like the one at the end that was Will and Jack and Barbosa and like the goons in like the Aztec gold kind of cave, are both so engaging and dynamic, and there's so many moving parts to them. And they're kind of, you get the full spectrum of like really simple 1v1 sword fight in a blacksmith shop and like moving parts, and some of them are skeletons, some of them aren't at the end, and they're both excellent. And they were sort of like, how do we do that better now? And they're like, let's have 3 people fight at once. And that idea is really cool. I like that idea. I find that to be engaging. I like the idea of like, each person is sort of motivated by a different thing around this chest in the middle that they're all fighting for. The problem becomes they go off and do their own thing, and then the 2 other idiot pirates whose names I'll never remember take the treasure chest, and then Elizabeth chases after them, and then fish people come and chase after them, and there's so much happening here. And then the 3 guys who are fighting over this one thing right here immediately lose their eyes on it and become distracted by just trying to fight each other all across this island, until eventually we just have them fighting while rolling down. Like, so much of my critiques, I think, of 2 and 3 are, and I alluded to this last week, one is a, fantastical film in the sense that there's a curse that turns people into skeletons that let them live forever, right? But like, it feels very real. Like, it feels like a pirate's tale that you would hear, right? Like back in like that time, like you'd hear this kind of story, right? It feels very authentic to the world of like pirates and seafaring and those kind of like tall tales, right? Whereas 2 and 3 don't, right? And like, I'd kind of forgotten that Naomi Harris was Calypso, and so then like I started like looking into Calypso, and spoiler alert for next week, like I forgot that there was a sequence of her being 60 feet tall in that movie, and I was like, oh yeah, they just completely don't give a fuck in like these other 2 movies. Just like, oh yeah, like this is all just like completely insane stuff. And like, I think part of what weakens these two movies for me is how much they stretch the bounds of like reality and realism, right? And one of the things that I like about 4 is that for the issues that are going to be evident in 4, it is just ultimately like, here's a treasure story again. Like, we're trying to find treasure in 4, and it's simple. Whereas like 2 and 3 are these giant, crazy, like, this wheel's going down and nothing's happening and reality doesn't matter and Jack falls 1,000 feet and doesn't die and, you know, all this. And like, how does Will stay on the Flying Dutchman for forever and doesn't die? And like, everything that's happening in 3, which is even worse. But like, I think that's the critiques I have that make them really suffer. Cam, go.
First off, after like cursed Aztec gold, heathen gods cursing Aztec gold, like somehow heathen gods and Christian god and this weird eclectic pseudo spiritualistic like mixed with Greek deityism with like Calypso and everything happening, like all bets are off the table in this franchise. I like the moment you introduce Aztec gold cursed skeleton men, anything can happen as far as the supernatural stuff goes. The bridge thing, a bridge too far, I will say.
But I think the difference there is that like that feels, I think, is a big difference, right? I think it's a big difference in like to me, like the Aztec gold feels like it would fit in with like an Indiana Jones, Nathan Drake, that kind of story. Like it, but like in a way that like feels
Indiana
like
Jones, where God is real and so are aliens, like dimensional travel.
Again, but like that, but I would argue that's sort of the distinction, right? Is that like, I think like the idea that God is real is not like a like, okay, sure thing. Like, but the idea that like aliens are like, I think makes it, and again, this is a whole episode we've done about this in the future at some point in time, but like, I think the difference for me for Aztec gold is cursed versus Calypso is real and gravity doesn't matter and we're spinning wheels down the hill and 60-foot flying monsters and that kind of shit. And the Kraken, for me at least, is that like Aztec gold is ultimately at its basic thing, like that's a treasure hunting story, right? Like that's what that is. Like Curse of Black Pearl is a treasure hunting story. And treasure hunting stories, we get a lot of those. And those don't seem beyond the realm of like your classic pirate story versus like 2 and 3 are they're way more grandiose and I think way more off the scale. And right, like you might think it's like a natural evolution, but I think it's like a much bigger leap to get to what 2 and 3 is. And like 3's got like the Council of Pirates who each have a coin that they locked Calypso into, right, to capture into immortal guys. That's a plot point in 3. And like that to me seems more ridiculous than anything in 1 is all I would say.
I'll jump in here. So I think the difference between like, yeah, it's all wild and out there. I think the difference is in Curse of the Black Pearl, the movie sets up its rules and it like abides by its own rules. Whereas here, the movie is just kind of like
the rules are really
building rule. It's very much like largely because this is what they were doing. It's building the rules and laying the track as they're on the train already, so it constantly is like violating and breaking its own rules and stuff like that. So that's where I think the biggest like difference from the supernatural element of this series like breaks from the first movie into the future of the series. Like, yeah, sure, they're all fantastical things, but to Logan's point, like it feels more grounded in the first movie because they established exactly what the guidelines of that curse were and how to break it. And even though, like, you know, of course it's not real, it's, you know, it's all that stuff, but it's like they set up, here's how this all goes. And in this movie and continuing on to at World's End, it's like, no, they didn't have any clue how to do that in any kind of satisfying manner. And so I think that's where that element suffers. I will also, jumping into back to the three-way fight, it also three-way fights, I think, suffer largely just like any, you know, three-way match in wrestling does, in that, yeah, it's great to have like all three guys fighting at once, but that's very hard to manage over the course of a longer thing. So you constantly have somebody taken out, so it becomes one-on-one, and then that other person comes in, somebody else gets taken out, and it becomes a new duel kind of set, because it's very difficult. Like there are a couple moments in that fight that are, you know, fun, and Jack with fighting Will and Norrington with like the two of them like kind of working in tandem against Jack, that works great, but they can't, they are constantly switching up the mechanics of that, and it just ends up being like, yeah, a clustered mess.
I think the best way that a 3-way fight works is when one person is like barely holding off the other two people. And the way about it, because they all had an objective with the heart, I think it works in a way that, okay, well, whoever has the heart has to fight off two guys at once. And as it kind of like exchanges through, I think that works really well, but it isn't until like when they are doing those weird.
But they don't have the heart at all during that fight.
Right.
Like they start the fight and they leave the heart behind
immediately.
And it's only through like random complete like
luck.
It's through the screenwriters that Jack ends up getting the heart long enough to put it in the jar of dirt, and then it's through even more luck and screenwriter tomfoolery that Norrington ends up getting enough lone time to take the heart out of the jar of dirt and do his whole thing. So
wait, hold on a second. Yeah, they do start that fight just fighting each other.
Are they
fighting for the sake of the key?
No, they start that fight to get the heart, but they immediately are drawing their swords and leave the heart and the chest. No,
they had the Elizabeth. Key. It was the key. They were fighting over the key to the chest.
Was it?
Yes, they had the key.
That's what they had.
They had the key,
it's
and the
because
key kept
they wanted
getting
the
knocked
heart
out, taken, exchanged, and that's where you would see the other two attacking the third person over and over again until one of the other two people got the key, and then there was the exchange 2 against 1 again. It isn't until like that very stupid he's actually the one that ruined your life thing. That moment, total like that at that point for me, the fight starts to really go nosedive downhill. That's also when you see Jack kind of like leave the fight to be inside the mill, like the mill wheel. That's when it starts being pretty bad.
Well, he doesn't leave the fight to go to the mill wheel. He falls in a grave and the mill wheel comes to him and basically like sucks him up like a suction cup.
Sorry. But I was saying it leads to that point that Trevor mentioned earlier of being inside the mill wheel.
Yeah.
Which is the worst part of the fight.
Which is also like, even that whole thing is they were on a very beachy island that suddenly has this very, deep watermill infrastructure in jungle
forever,
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It is very much the opposite of like how well choreographed and shot the fights were from the last time. It very much is like, and I remember the mill fight being the big like showcase thing that they would show off in like the behind the scenes kind of featurettes and stuff like that. Look at how cool this thing is. Look at, and it is like, okay, yeah, but it's an interesting enough visual, but we've started to move into that era where, films have a bajillion edits, so like everything is so frantically cut and paste that you can't follow what's actually going on. And even there, like the idea, I think it's almost like the idea would be more interesting, because part of it is also just the shots where we are like following the wheel turning. The camera is staying in one position while the wheel is turning, but like not in the right way to make that like dynamic and interesting. So the whole thing just looks fake, as opposed to like if we were watching if it had been like, oh, there's clearly wire work and like they're clearly on this real thing and they're doing it in, half speed or something like that to actually like choreograph this fight. It just looks completely unrealistic from what they actually end up having and showing there. That ends up, I think, making that fight suffer compared to the fights for the first one.
Yeah. My last critique of the mill fight scene, sort of piggybacking off what you just said, Trevor, because I think it's actually kind of crystallized it a bit more in my head, is that it sort of feels like this movie was filmed and written as it was happening, because it sort of felt like, oh, we haven't really choreographed a fight scene yet. We haven't really mapped that out. So like, let's choreograph half a fight scene and then put the other half on a wheel, so they don't really have to fight each other, just to like hang on for dear life and like sort of just jump around.
But that kind of like physical effect isn't something you can kind of like slapdash together by the seat of your pants. Like that does take work.
But it has that same feel to it. Is what I like. It sort of feels very much like fly by the seat of your pants. There's no way, like
in practicality of putting that thing together, that I think you could do that.
All right,
slapdash.
You guys got to be better about not talking over each other. And Cam, I'm docking you a point on that one.
But yeah, so. No, I think that they're like I was saying. Where was I off on my notes? Oh yes. So I don't think that there's any part of this film that I think is just like so irredeemable. I think that there's parts that don't work, obviously.
Yeah.
But nothing. And like to Trevor's point, like there are scenes that like brought back into context, like absolutely are atrocious, and I'm wrong on that front of it. Not a part of it being atrocious. There are certain parts. Half of, I actually think half of, if not the entirety of the cannibal section is one, like just really culturally insensitive, for a lot of things outside. And even if you want to go with the gumshoe pop culture type, not gumshoe, sorry, the dime novel pop culture stuff that a lot of pirates culture stuff is based, or pirate stories are based out of, it should, like, there should be some points to it. But I will also say that it also, like, the way that Jack somehow knows the language, and it's just all like quote unquote savage talk. The way that it's pretty kind of like not okay on a lot of levels on that one.
I mean, like even to that, I would say, like, before we even get there, there's so much like, but how does any of it, like the fact that, like, okay, how did Jack end up in a prison again, and how did, like, it seems like his breakout of like, oh, they hid him in a coffin is like somehow more interesting than anything we're going to see. But then like he immediately gets the black spot and he's like, let's drive us to ground. And then we pick up and yeah, who knows how long they've been there, but he has somehow, ingratiated him with the locals and whatnot. And yeah, like they just go from scene to scene without any like inclination of actually establishing how, like, what happened in between the scenes. And so yes, it's very much that thing of like, okay, well, if you think about this for more than a minute, you're like, but none of this makes sense. What, like, how does any of this happening? And yeah, I think that scene very much a less culturally sensitive time. Obviously, I don't think that's a scene that you would see made today, but it's also like even only 15 years ago or whatever, 18 years ago, it's like, it's also still not, it's not a good scene, especially not for as long as it is. It's just like, this is a funny idea that those two screenwriters thought they had, and so they're gonna just, there's our thing. We need to get Jack and Will back together, and this is how we're gonna do it. And it's gonna be this weird little quirky, oh, Jack's actually like the leader of these people, but he's actually their captive, and yeah, it's just weird. And then you also have that set up aside with the the two bone cages full of crew people. Mm-hmm. One, the people we recognize from the last movie. The others, clearly sacrificial lambs who are only exist in this movie to die, to like set up quote unquote stakes for the survivors and stuff like that. So much so that they lampshade it and they're like, well, actually, you'd only need 6 people to do it. And it's just like, oh my God, just stop. Yeah, like so much of this movie just feels like screenwriters thinking they're clever more than actually writing clever. A good script.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It also just speaks to the fact that there is no through line for almost any of this. It's
any of it. Right.
There's nothing stitching these scenes together well. It's just done really, really, really poorly for almost the entire film, and I fear for next week. Watching the third film, and like, because I don't have, like, watching this again as an adult, like I haven't seen this in well over 10-15 years. This without a doubt like frightens me for the third one, because I don't remember either of the last two, or the second or third film, being great in any respect. That being said, I think that the last thing I'll put out is, and it's kind of to the point of like, oh, this is like slapdash put together, not a good through line. A good chunk of this plot of this movie is Jack doesn't know what he wants, which is just like such a massive red flag of writing. it's not like they don't bring up, oh, he's conflicted. It's, no, Jack just doesn't know what he wants. And it's like, okay. I thought he knew what he wanted because he literally was just in a prison and broke out of it through a coffin to get what he thought he needed. And like, there's a lot of stuff around all of that that I'm just like super confused by, and just, it doesn't make any sense. And that entire, like, it really is kind of like the glaring red flag of this entire movie, is that this movie really doesn't also know what it wants to be. It doesn't know if it wants to be a fun pirate adventure. It doesn't know if it wants to be a like world establishing film about like the cinematic, like it's an example of trying to set up a cinematic universe before we were fully aware of the concepts of a cinematic universe. And it's trying to set up a film franchise that, weirdly enough, this film and the next film, I think, make a great argument why not everything needs to be a film franchise. Better than almost anything else I can think of. So I don't really have any more thoughts other than other than that. Like, also, but Bill Nighy's fucking awesome as Davy Jones. He's so fucking rad as Davy Jones. Absolutely, Davy Jones is such a rad fucking character. For them to take like this concept or idea of like what could Davy Jones be, and they're like, what if he's a Cthulhu squid man who does the Phantom of the Opera with an organ in his quarters and is in love, like, and has a tragic love story that he literally cut out his own heart, and it's like, that's such a cool concept and a cool thing to like go off of. And
they pull it off. Like, he's rad, right?
He's rad as hell. He's so cool, and it's just like, it totally fits in with kind of like the romantic atmosphere that pirates carry. That it's like, oh, Davy Jones, he's a scoundrel, but he has this tragic backstory about him. But he chose to cut out his own heart, and it's just like. And it's funny, it's goofy, but at the same time, just like unbelievable, like borderline scary. Like when he's just like, we're not taking on any new crew members, mass execution. Great. The whole thing of like pledge your soul and stave off damnation. Like there's so many great moments about it that like make Davy Jones work super well. And it's all sold by Bill Nighy's incredible performance. And shout out to his little squigglies.
Yeah, I will. I'll echo the love for Bill Nighy. I think he is like one of the shining beacons amongst this. One of my notes: far too gray film. Like that's like the bright, world of the Caribbean that we got from the first film just got like thrown into the muckety muck of like terrible, super grayified cinematography and bad like color grading and all that stuff. And then my other like big gripe that I want to kind of end my thoughts on is I think this movie also has such a ridiculous over-reliance on the jokes that worked in the first movie. The only one that I will like give them a little bit of credit for that I enjoyed and got a little bit of a chuckle out of me is when it sets up like they're doing the dog bit again, and then the camera cuts over and it's Elizabeth. Like, I was like, that's a fun little subversion on it. Says a whole bunch of bad, like, sexist kind of shit too. But at least it wasn't them just doing the dog thing again, especially because they'd already done the dog thing again earlier in the film. And yeah, there's just like so many of those moments where it's just like, all like the Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack, and they're just trying to pull every little bit of like, oh, here are the beats that like really resonated with people from the first film. Let's just dump all of those right into our immediate sequel in a way that it just feels like gratuitous to me. So
yeah, I think I 100% agree with both of you. I think Davy Jones is phenomenal in this movie. I think he's probably easily my favorite part of the film, and he's such a pirate story, right? Like like his arc in this film and in the next one, at least from what I remember, because I really have not seen that one since it came out, is like, yeah, pirate stories should have this kind of tragic romanticism to them, I think. And I think, that is part of what makes Jack Sparrow so interesting, is that he's sort of this like romantic idea of like what a pirate is. And like ultimately Jack is a good person, which makes it so weird that they spend this entire movie talking about the city of like, is Jack good? It's like, well, he sort of proved that in the last one. He's like definitely gray and he'll definitely sell you out for himself, but like he will barely, but more often than not, do the right thing, right? Like, and I think that's fits in with Davy Jones being this like Cameron said, like this really tragic figure who was like a scoundrel, but who fell in love and had this great deep love, right? That has spanned even longer since they both have had shit happen to him with Calypso. Cuts out his heart. Like all that is super like intriguing and exciting, and he looks phenomenal. The performance is great, right? It's just sort of in a movie that has nothing to lift it up with, right? Just kind of like sinks around it. I did want to give a shout out to Keira Knightley, though. I do think Elizabeth is given more to do in this movie in a lot of ways, especially in terms of like action-y things to do, right? Like that I found her character really engaging and interesting. Will, I think, maybe suffers the most of any of the main trio because he is arguably the main character of the first one out of the entire trio. And this one, it sort of feels like he gets the least to do. He has to go find Jack, and then Jack takes over. He gets to be on a ship with his dad where he gets outshined by Davy Jones, and arguably his dad, too, is more interested than him in those sequences and like more sad. And then he gets put in a sword fight, and then it's sort of over, right? And it's just sort of like he just sort of muddles along a lot of this movie. We all obviously, I think, have our critiques of Jack in the film, but like I do think there are good performances here. I do really like Davy Jones, and I do actually ultimately really like Elizabeth Swann. Having said that, in classic Dead Man's Chest fashion, I am going to end on a down note and say that like what they do with Norrington is so dumb, and like I like it doesn't make any sense from where we last saw that character. Like that is, I think, sort of my big gripe, and I don't remember if it was Trevor or Cameron, so forgive me, who said it, but like there are so many characters who, where we left them, where we last saw them to where we see them now, there was like a whole other movie in between that should have explained how we got to these situations. And Norrington is maybe the one who, like, I think most suffers from like all you cared about was like duty and this job and this kind of stuff. And I know that like Elizabeth left you, but you never really had her. So like it's weird that it suffered that much that you're gonna become like a drunk alcoholic who's doing this kind of stuff now, and
that's not why he became
to find
a drunk
Jack Sparrow
alcoholic.
And like all
he suffered massive embarrassment after like losing his he lost Jack in a by trying to sail through a hurricane, and so he resigned his commission in disgrace.
Yeah,
like that's why it happened. It had very little, if anything, to do with Elizabeth.
I disagree. Like I think that I think very clearly he's. I mean, so you hear way more of him griping about not having Elizabeth in this movie than suffering through a hurricane going on. Like, I think that is like an underlying cause. And like, I also just think either way, like, I think there is this element of, I don't buy that character arc for Norrington, right? Like, I don't buy that just because he missed Jack because he had a hurricane happen and destroyed it, like, yada, yada, yada kind of shit. Like, I think he's someone who would never resign his commission at any point in time. He's so duty driven in the first movie. Like, I don't see anything in that makes me go like, he's just gonna resign because he failed once, right? Like, he's someone who I think the whole first movie is him not getting Jack repeatedly, but still trying harder and harder and harder, right? Like, and even if he did resign, I don't see him going the route of like, I resigned, I'm just going to be like this dirty, drunken like guy in like a mud pit now. Like, that is not the Norrington I see in the first movie to where we get from now. That's why I'm like, there's like a story in between that has something happening, I think, that fills in that gap way more effectively than what we get here, which is like, boom, this is where we see him. And they give like a brief, like, here's 30 seconds of dialogue to kind of explain it. And it's like, oh, okay, I want way more for that.
I felt like his entire scene in the tavern sets that up pretty, like, maybe not neatly, but okay enough, where he lost Jack. Like, I don't know if it says that he lost his ship, but basically, like, he was at some point he was humiliated to the point where he had like the only way for him to save face was to resign his commission. Otherwise, nobody would respect him. I don't know.
I mean, that I think is you reading between lines. There is like the bit of like, oh, there was a hurricane or something like that. But to Logan's point, like, I would say we get as much time towards like why Norrington resigned as we do Norrington, going to Elizabeth and saying, there was a time I'd have given anything for you to look at me that way, kind of thing.
Right.
And like, so I think for both, like, reasons of Norrington's fall, like the movie does it is just kind of like, well, we want this Beckett guy to be the big bad now. So
right.
And Norrington doesn't really like have a purpose if he's not that big bad. So yeah, I guess but we like Jack Davenport. We want to throw him into the movie.
Right.
So,
we already signed him to the deal. We got to have him in the movie. Right.
Yeah. So like, again, it feels like the writers didn't come up with interesting or satisfying ways to move the pieces around the board. They just kind of plot them down and be like, this is where they are now.
Right.
So I think that's.
I mean, I don't disagree with that note of this is where they are now, and I do think like there's a lot of in between stuff that we missed. My point of contention was that Norrington's entire like I don't know. I feel like Logan was putting a greater emphasis on it being like because of Elizabeth that Norrington's in that place versus it's clear that for me it was clear that Norrington's pride and arrogance was the cause of his fall more than anything else, and like resigned to disgrace because of that. But to another point to speak about Elizabeth though, I think Keira Knightley's fantastic. Yeah. I found it interesting that half her plot drive to give as a reason to male characters about why she wanted to do things or why she was motivated. Like, wow, you're so motivated. And she was referencing she was robbed of her wedding night. And I'm like, that's an interesting thought that they decided like to make way too much of an emphasis on. But other than that, yeah.
I mean, even that, like, that's the first image we see of her is, drenched in the rain in her wedding dress kind of thing. And East India in all of the gray glory of this film is showing up to be the big bad and say, hey, we're arresting all you people. And yeah, so it is just very much like it doesn't do an interest. Like, I mean, from like, you could look at something, let's go back to Empire. Like, Empire doesn't really bother introducing or explaining how we went from the destruction of the Death Star to the crew on Hoth, apart from like the crawl. But this movie just doesn't even have a crawl. It just kind of like puts these characters into a completely new place and doesn't bother explaining how they got from point A to point B. Or if it does, it's just it's a throwaway one line kind of thing. And it's just like the reality is this is where the screenwriters needed this character to be to move the plot along or to introduce the new conflicts that we're going to have in this one. And it's just very like, that's not good. That's not well done. Anyway, we've ragged on this enough and, given the few flowers to the few things that we liked. Let's dive into the report card where you grade from A+ to F. Logan, I will let you go first. What do you want to grade Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest? I have no idea what we graded it last time. I did not bother going back and digging into that, but
it's interesting. I don't hate the movie, right? I think I'm gonna give it a C, right? Like I don't think it is terrible, right? It's definitely not great. It's like this weird roller coaster movie in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think the best description I can give is like, there's a lot of like promising seeds planted, and then like, they just don't really give any of them time to sprout fully, except for like Davy Jones. I think from a technical level, it's like kind of amazing. Still a lot of the stuff they pull off with like special effects. I think this movie's really ugly. That was the first note and the thing I kept coming back to when I watched it last night. It's like, this movie's just ugly. It's just an ugly looking movie, which is such a shame after I think how beautiful Curse of Black Pearl holds up 20 years later, right? And this one just sort of doesn't. I think Will's wasted. I think Jack is sort of wasted. But there are like these like few through lines of like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I like this. Oh, I like that. We didn't really touch on it at all, but like, I hate that Barbossa's back. And we'll spend more time on that next week, I assume, but like, that's such a dumb, I hate that, right? And to your point, Trevor, that we've kind of all talked on a little bit, like, it tries so hard to be Empire Strikes Back, and I think it just doesn't understand what makes Empire so good, other than just like, it's the dark one, and it's like, let's be dark and moody now, without really understanding kind of the spirit of that. And so it's a C for me. I know, maybe a C minus, whatever, but like it's not bad, it's not terrible. It's just sort of like, okay, right? I wanted more out of this, I think, for me.
Cameron, where do you want to grade it?
It's a D plus, actually. This film, if you get me to a point where I can be like, yeah, I liked a lot of this film, like I liked all the parts of it, but I feel that exhausted and tired after watching it, like you're like, it's a bad film. I think at the end of the day, this is not a good film. Because if just the way that it all comes together, the way that for all the other problems that we have with it, I just don't think it's a good film. I think that there's parts of it, and I think a majority of the parts of it are pretty good or pretty fantastic, but the way that it's actually put together, the way that it's edited, the way that it just feels so bloated and over heavy. And by the time I'm through carrying this movie all the way to its end, I'm exhausted and I'm tired and I don't want to watch the next one. We're going to watch the next one. I don't want to. I don't like that.
Yeah, I a lot of times when I feel a way about a movie on this show, I'll give it like a D plus for the bit, but I don't even want to do that. It's not a full blown F for me, but it is a D. I did not have a fun time doing this, and yeah, like Cameron and I, as soon as we're done recording this, are going to sit down and watch At World's End because we got to record that one before I go off to Disney next week. And so
I forgot about that.
I'm not looking forward to that. At least it will probably work better in at least that rapid succession to get all of these like beats paid off.
That's what I do think. I think 3 might be better because it's actually going to like have an ending and kind of wrap up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I think as we've touched on, like there's just a lot, especially off of like how high the first one. I think we all gave the last one an A plus. Like
we did, yeah.
How great that was, and like the tone that set and what it could have been as a follow up. This is just like a disappointment on pretty much every level, apart from Bill Nighy and maybe a couple other elements. I think this just suffers from just a lot of bad decisions, a lot of like learning the wrong lessons from the first movie, as we kind of talk about a lot. So yeah, a D for me. But since we are doing all of the Pirates movies, God help us, we've got a few more little segments that we threw in, starting with last week's. So first, we'll dive into the Rank Them Scallywags. We, of course, had Barbossa from the first film. Do we want to include Beckett and Davy Jones in this one, or just
sure? Why not?
Davy Jones?
Why not?
All right.
Why not both?
So where do they fall in comparison to Jeffrey Rush's Barbossa?
May I make a proposal?
Sure.
We call this one Davy Jones because Beckett is a minor antagonist, but in the next film, Beckett is a leading protagonist while Jones is relegated to a lesser.
You mean leading antagonist?
Leading antagonist, thank you. Yeah. So I think if we say Davy Jones is this leading antagonist, and the next film, Beckett is the leading antagonist, I think that would be fair.
Okay.
So in order to not have to conflate two, because Davy Jones deserves to be on his own.
So Davy Jones compared
well, we would have ranked
to
them
Barbossa,
separately, I think.
Yeah. Where we ranking Davy Jones? I mean, like part of it, based on even that logic, is I think Davy Jones suffers because we are only seeing part of his story compared to Barbossa had a very full, fun beginning, middle, end in the last film. And yeah, he's going to come back and he's going to be stupid. But at least like in terms of that, I don't think there's any way that as great as Bill Nighy is, surpasses Barbossa, because Barbossa, as we often say, knew exactly what kind of movie he was in last week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say that Davy Jones, I think, is a more classic, like, baddie, right? Whereas Barbossa, even he, and again, it's in such a great piratey way, like, sort of revels in, like, he's basically, like, the slightly badder version of Jack, but it's still not, like, evil, right? And so, like, that is sort of the fun, is that, like, Jack and Barbossa are sort of, like, very much similar, like, people, just one kind of went a little bit good and one went a little bit bad. I do think Davy Jones is excellent, and I am excited we get to see more of him because I think he's a fun character. But yeah, I would agree that Barbossa is first and Davy Jones is second for the ranking. Both are very good though. We haven't had a drop off in villains yet.
Okay, you there with us, Cam?
I'm like, they are so close. They are so neck and neck. The reason why I wanted to like make sure Beckett wasn't tying down Davy Jones for this film is because Davy Jones does such a great job of.
To clarify, I'm not saying like the villains of this movie. You know, I'm not doing the ragu bagu thing. I'm saying like
Davy Jones
where we want to put Davy Jones, judge him as a villain, and Beckett judge him as a villain. It's not like the dead man's chest villains.
Yeah.
My apologies, everybody. My apologies. I think narratively and within the storytelling, Barbossa plays better as a villain. But part of me also has to weigh like there is no way that anybody is as evil as the East India Trading Company. They're just Beckett as their representative is representing the entire company, which means the atrocities of real life go hand in hand with it. No, I'm joking. Barbossa is I think he's a better villain, but Davy Jones is just such a fantastic.
He's great.
He borders that line that we talked about between that low level fantasy and high level fantasy that we'll run into in the next film. He borders that so well he feels real enough without it being too outlandish. And he just 100 years aboard his ship. And also shout out to the effect of the dude who literally has his like brain pulled out when he pops up, by the way. So rad. Such a good effect. I think they're both great, but I do rank Barbossa higher just because narratively, like you said, he's just a darker, like nastier version of Jack, but also at the same time, Barbossa is reasonable. You can talk to Barbossa. You can reason through
make a deal.
Things. Right, he's not a force of nature. He's an actual character. And I think that's what elevates him as far as a villain goes, or a scallywag, I should say.
Yeah, I think we can absolutely like revisit the Davy Jones conversation, and maybe he does pull ahead of Barbossa in the next film once we've gotten his whole story kind of put in there. In particular, I'm like, I don't quite remember. It's been a very long time since I've seen At World's End, so it's very much going to be how does his story like play out? Does he like obviously Beckett? Since the whole series is about a love of pirates. Of course, the non-pirates are the real bad guy here. Much like, Barbossa in and of himself is just being a very fun pirate. He's a pirate who's an antagonist to Jack and our characters in the first one. But other than that, he's just pirate who got caught up in cursed Aztec gold. So that made him more of a menacing pirate than he probably ever even intended. He basically goes from like a first mate who mutinied at just the wrong time. But I think then it becomes this interesting conversation that we can have next week of, Cutler Beckett is a bad guy, but he's like in D&D terms or whatever, he's like lawful evil or whatever, versus chaotic evil that the pirates are or something like that. Or chaotic neutral that the pirates are, I guess, probably more so. So it'll be interesting where we decide to throw that in there.
It would also be interesting, I'll just say to that point too, Trevor, of like tracing the arc of Barbossa through this, because Barbossa is going to be in every movie from here on out in the series. And as we all said last week, we all love him. Like we said, right now, we all love him. And as I just said, he's such a fun, like slightly darker version of Jack. And they're very quickly going to sand off a lot of his edges from the first movie and make him basically just like a slightly lamer version of Jack from here on out, which is really unfortunate. They don't really utilize him in the same way. So it'd also be interesting to see, even just comparing the two in the next movie where they each kind of get moments to shine, who we like more in kind of that respective film.
Indeed. Let's dive into the Rank That Booty. Of course, in the first movie, we had our Aztec gold.
I forgot about that.
This time around, we have the Dead Man's Chest. What do we think of Dead Man's Chest as our MacGuffin as opposed to Aztec gold?
I'll go first. My opinion, not as good. The effect of I think when it comes to like power and like narrative stuff, of course, Dead Man's Chest wins out because you literally get to control Davy Jones. But I don't want to control Davy Jones through threat to his life or existence or whatnot. I want to be cool with Davy Jones. know what is cooler than just threatening Davy Jones? An entire undead skeleton crew. Holy crap. The Aztec gold is so much cooler. I rank that booty higher.
It's also actual treasure instead of a guy's heart. So yeah.
Again,
and you look at that, know that thing was buried before. You know that was that entire chest, that stone chest filled with Aztec gold. You know that was buried before.
Like that's my whole thing, right? Like I've touched on it multiple times. Like I like that one is a treasure hunting movie, like right, like it has that vibe to it, right? And this one, I don't even know what genre of film this really is. It's very muddled, but like I think it's a cool idea to like play off like, you know, Davy Jones and I like a lot of what they do around like the mythology of Davy Jones in Dead Man's Chest, which is maybe why I have it ranked a little bit higher. But like as an actual like thing they're going after, it's not treasure. It's just a heart, right? It's inherently going to be like just less interesting, I think, and it is. And yeah, I think it's definitely the Aztec gold.
Sorry, yeah. And then the one that actually can be a fun little debate here. Where do we want to throw the Flying Dutchman in terms of our fleet that we've been ranking? We of course have the Black Pearl at number 1. We had the Interceptor at number 2 and Dauntless at number 3. I would presume Flying Dutchman is going to go up above Interceptor, but does it beat out the Black Pearl, which is also destroyed in this one?
Yeah,
that's not going to last long because the next movie is absolutely going to make no sense. But what do we think of the Flying Dutchman?
The Flying Dutchman for me is number 1 because not only is it a ship, it's also a submarine.
All right.
Sure, basically,
it also has the triple guns.
That's true. The triple guns on front, and it has those cool cannons that when the things lift up, the seawater pours out. And they're all covered. Yeah. It's all covered in barnacles. Also, it's all covered in dudes who have become one with the ship. And that one dude who pops out, we're like, that's a cool effect. That's technically part of the ship. The Black Pearl's just like kind of a cool black ship with kind of like raggedy sails.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts to add, Logan?
It's tough. I think they're very close. I think the Flying Dutchman's really, again, I think so much of the movie around Davy Jones is awesome. Like, I think what they do with his mythology is really cool. And I think the Flying Dutchman's a great example of that, right? Like, I think that ship looks so cool. I also think that, like, they sort of make the Black Pearl, I think, less exciting in this movie, just the way it's shot than in the first film. It doesn't feel as cool, which is sort of disappointing. Like, I'll be curious if they like give it like a big triumphant return in the next one when it's going to come back. Spoiler, to make it feel cool again. I just have no memories of that film basically. But the Flying Dutchman's rad. I have no objections to making it first. It's very close for me, but I think the way it's just like silhouetted at night, especially, like I think the Flying Dutchman looks really, really cool. And just how like alive it is, like Cameron said.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to throw Flying Dutchman in there at number 1 because I think to what you said there, Logan, I think they do make the Black Pearl a boring ship in this one by comparison. Like especially by comparison to the Flying Dutchman that is like this horror ship. And maybe it is like maybe the Black Pearl was just cooler when it was run by a literal skeleton crew. Maybe that's what made the Black Pearl really, really cool. Now there's just Jack's, ship with his, little haphazard little crew of guys, which also we didn't spend a ton of time talking to them, but also just now inherits the pirate dummies from the first movie just because people liked them and needed to find a way to keep them in the franchise. So sure, let's have them switch allegiance too. Why not?
I will also say that the Flying Dutchman has the dudes who have to run the turn to release the Kraken. And the thing doesn't just like turn, it like pops up so you get like the rising Kraken thing. And that's rad as hell.
Yeah.
Yep, cool. Absolutely beating the drum there. Flying Dutchman, I have no problem putting that in at number 1 because the Black Pearl just kind of takes a back seat in this film to everything else going on. much like everybody else in the movie, loses a lot of its character development. It gets sacrificed. And then finally, our overall ranking of the series. I imagine we're all on the same page that this falls well below Curse of the Black Pearl. Dead Man's Chest coming in at number 2. And from here on in is where it gets interesting of like, okay, well, how does everything else rank up against Black Pearl? Because I feel like that's the one, like that's the one that's hard to beat. So it'd be interesting.
We all gave it an A+ last week. Yeah, I agree.
Some extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Unsurprisingly, all of the other Pirates movies, at World's End, then on Stranger's Tide, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and then go back and watch the actual good one, Curse of the Black Pearl. Then you have Mulan, National Treasure, Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and The Princess Bride, which is actually a standout.
A really weird collection
in the recommendations there. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus, or we pretty much all just watched Pirates and we're like, that's enough Disney for now?
That's enough Disney for right now.
Yeah. How about you, Cam?
We're about to go watch World's End.
Yeah. Did you ever watch episode 2 of Mandalorian last week?
No.
I
watched that too.
That
I'm excited for.
We're also recording this episode earlier than we normally would. So like this week's episode of Mandalorian has not yet come out. So I can't weigh in on that. But we'll be recording our At World's End episode a couple days from now in our timeline. It'll still go up the normal time for everybody else. But yeah, that's just going to be a weird like time jumpy kind of thing for us. But yeah, Cam and I are going to sit down and watch that pretty much as soon as we wrap up here. Yay. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. That's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Hey, I'll give a shout out to all the excellent Let's Plays going live Monday through Friday, it feels like, over on the YouTube channel. Trevor and Cameron just had a really exciting episode go live today. I think Twitter is so weird in terms of like if it's put in stuff that's actually from today or from like a day ago on my timeline at this point now because it's a broken app thanks to Elon. But I think it happened today and not yesterday of Trevor and Cameron going through Elden Ring and playing some scary looking monster whose name I already forgot. It's a really fun episode though. And I really enjoy Trevor and Cameron doing things together. I think they're a very interesting, fun duo. You should go watch them play games together. You'll have a great time like I have had. So I encourage everyone to go check that out. And then Cameron has started to at least put in Slack the first few episodes of Jedi Fallen Order. I don't know if they've actually gone live yet or not, but he's filmed them at the very least.
Yeah, those will be going live Wednesdays now is kind of our tentative schedule for that. So the episode 2 has not gone live as we're recording this on Tuesday night, but it will episode 2 will go live tomorrow. So that'll be live by the time this episode is airing for people.
Go check that out as well.
Indeed. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yes. I would like to give a shout out to normally I say shout out to .D Plus Show, but we're doing this. So watch that nerdy
That's
site
the
show.
podcast.
Watch that nerdy site show. Trevor and I talk about the season finale of The Last of Us.
As motorcycles race by our window.
We talk about The Last of Us The Last of Us season finale. It is it's a great discussion about it, and we kind of get back into our age-old discussion about the ending of the Last of Us game, and things get good. Go check it out.
Indeed. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to the things everybody else has already shouted out, I will echo the Let's Plays. The one that we didn't mention is my replay through Breath of the Wild that is out there on Thursdays. So yeah, we basically have something going live every day of the week. We have our That Nerdy Site show going Mondays, Elden Ring Tuesdays, Jedi Fallen Order Wednesdays, Breath of the Wild Thursdays, and D Plus on Fridays right now. So yes, enjoy all of that. In our timeline of things, I have finished Breath of the Wild and recorded the I'll still do some more episodes on the DLC stuff, but I've re-beaten the game for the first time since it originally came out. And so yeah, stay tuned for
Yeah.
episodes for the next month and change leading.
You
up
like the game
to
anymore?
Tears of the Kingdom. I will say, yeah, I liked it better the second time around because I knew what to expect. Still have all the same issues I had the first time around, and they're still all very bad aspects of that game. But since I knew to expect them this time around, I was less annoyed by them, and or figured out how to work around them and make do. So yeah, I think time served better. Still don't think this is anywhere near the best game of all time, and as it is in so many people's eyes. But I didn't hate it as much as I thought I might coming back and revisiting that game. So stay tuned for those Let's Plays as they continue to go live on Thursdays. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, subscribe, review, like the podcast, share it with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and really bad eggs.